Welcome to the Education Marketing Leader podcast with Chris Rapozo. If you're looking to dive into the latest industry insights, draw inspiration from education success stories, or just want to sharpen your marketing skills, you're in the right place. Here, we bring you a diverse range of voices from experts and leaders in the field, offering you a unique blend of professional development and practical strategies. Whether you want to understand your audience better, stay updated with the latest tech trends in marketing, or expand your professional network, we've got you covered. So while you're driving on your morning commute or winding down after a busy day, let's explore the dynamic world of education marketing together.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Education Marketing Leader. My name is Chris Rapozo, and today I have a special guest joining me from the Big Easy, New Orleans, Louisiana, Eddie Francis. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris, man. It is good to be on the show. Good to hang out with you.
Very good. Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. We always talk offline, so it's now good to make it official. You know, if it doesn't happen on a podcast, see, it didn't happen in real life. But a little bit of a background about you. You're a brand strategy consultant, you're a leadership enthusiast, award-winning broadcaster. I know you're doing the traffic right now down in Louisiana. You're a keynote speaker and you're a podcast host of the Enrollify show, I Want to Work There. So today's episode is going to be about employer branding and how to find the right talent, keep the right talent, and make sure that your institution is thriving. Background about you, you have a BA in Mass Communication from Loyola University in New Orleans, and so have a Master's in Strategic Leadership from Tennessee State University. I know you are a proud HBCU grad. You've talked about it before, and we've talked about it offline as well. And you started working in higher ed in about 2007. In between higher ed, like I know your last job was at Dillard University, but before then you worked in recruitment of all places. So you have a good angle there on how to find the right talent to come to a university. Now, but you went out on your own for to start Edify Ventures. Tell us a little bit about your background, why you were so drawn to higher education, and why you decided to step away from the university setting to help other institutions through your venture.
Yeah, I born and raised here. Being born and raised here in New Orleans. My first higher ed job was at Southern University of New Orleans, and I was drawn to it because I've always had some kind of interest in higher education. You know, my parents were actually high school teachers. And my dad at one point, my dad goes, he says, "Hey, listen, let me tell you something, boy. Don't be a teacher, okay? I don't think you can deal with it." And he was right. But he was really talking specifically about high school. And you know, my family does have a background in education. You know, my grandfather was a teacher, and my great-grandfather, I should say, Maynard Hilaire Nelson, who has an elementary school named after him. He was actually someone who talked to the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament in the Archdiocese of New Orleans about the possibility of founding Xavier University of Louisiana. And so with that kind of history and the ties that I had to Dillard, where I had uncles who went to Dillard, uncles who went to Southern University of New Orleans, definitely lots of cousins who went to Xavier. When I started working at SUNO, I was drawn into higher ed at that time because, quite honestly, it was a job that was open. A friend of mine thought I could do the job. But when I got in, I really wanted to be there because I just felt this incredible sense of responsibility with it being a historically Black university, especially in my city and my community. I really wanted to be part of the solution. I wanted to be part of the brain gain of the city. And so, but then on top of that, as I progressed in higher education, Director of Communications at Paul Quinn, Director of Communications and Marketing at Dillard, this sense of purpose started to get much bigger because then I started looking at what higher education means to my community, to the Black community. And so that is really, really what got me committed to wanting to stay in the higher ed space, even after not working on a campus That's what really got me into it. And so when I stepped away from higher ed, at least campus life, a year ago, I'm not going to lie. I mean, one of the things that I talk to with a lot of colleagues who work on campuses is how stressful being a marketing and communications leader can be on college campuses. It can be an extremely stressful job. And it had gotten to that point for me. It became a very stressful thing for me. My wife, who is a professor at Tulane, she and I were having a conversation after my last job, and she goes, listen, do you really want to go work on campus again? And I'm sitting there going, yeah, I want to work on campus. I love campus life. And she goes, yeah, but you were really stressed out. She said, let me ask you this question another way. Are you going to flip tables your first week working on another campus? And I said, yes, I will. I will flip some tables my first week on campus. And so, and she said, you know what? Do what you want to do. What do you really want to do? And Chris, I had been talking about employer branding issues just nonstop. I had kept talking about this stuff. I kept talking about the way that I saw colleges and universities hiring people. I kept talking about how ridiculous the hiring process could be. I kept talking about how non-existent onboarding could be at colleges and universities. And then looking around at campuses, there was also a bit of an annoyance that I had developed for how leadership was done, because a lot of it to me just didn't seem people-centered. And I'm sitting here going, well, this is higher education. This is definitely a people business. And so I decided to really turn my energies to doing my own thing, wanting to go to colleges and universities and saying, hey, listen, if you really want your students to have a great experience, you need people to help the students, you need people to deliver that great experience to students. But you just can't hire warm bodies. You need to hire people who, number one, want to be on your campus. They want to work in higher education. And then on top of that, they are people who are going to have the not only the skill set, but they are going to have the competencies that you really, really need to work with these students, both on the faculty side and the staff side. And oh, by the way, it's not just about going out and getting anybody. Get the people who are truly going to help your culture, really help it grow. The people who are going to fit the culture and help the culture grow. So you got to find the right people for your campus, right? And the top professor in the region may not be the right person for your campus. And so I really decided to commit to wanting to spread that message. That's how the podcast came up. And that's what I want to do right now, as far as consulting and training people at colleges and universities to make sure they are great employers of choice.
Yeah, talking about employer branding, you had a presentation at the Hannon Hills Cascade User Conference recently about that particular topic, which was very insightful. The other thing you talked about, you just don't want warm bodies on campus in a role of people that don't necessarily want to be there. Maybe they're just there to collect a paycheck. We all know how annoying the experience is when you go to the DMV and you see people sitting in those chairs that clearly don't want to be there.
Yeah, they're like the sloth in Zootopia. That was such a great characterization of DMV life. Yes,
exactly. So if you have somebody like that at the admissions office or something like that, this is the biggest turnoff. People will never come back when they have that there, right? So you want brand ambassadors. You want what they call in a B2B world evangelists side of the higher institutions that are still going to promote your company, your institutions. Like where I work, where I constantly talk about Hannon Hill. I'm talking about Hannon Hill on this podcast right now. They don't sponsor it, but I'm still like, hey, I love you and I love being part of that culture. But let's talk about that a little bit more, campus culture and how to attract top talent. So in your experience, what are the key elements that contribute to a campus culture that attracts top talent? Is it money or is there something else?
Money counts. Let's be clear. Money helps. It helps a lot. But there's been human resources research that's been done over the years that shows that money is not the main motivator. People want to be appreciated. And so one of the first things I think, is for the institution in question to make sure that they have motivated faculty and staff, the people who really want to be there. I think also, I think it's important for campuses to have leadership, not just presidents. I'm talking about the presidents and their cabinets, who really understand that great employees do attract great students. A lot of times you'll hear people. I was actually on a panel discussion not too long ago, where there was this point in which people, the folks were asking questions about what kinds of leaders really do, and I said, listen, the numbers crunchers, the bottom liners, and all those folks, yes, definitely, we need them. You got to make sure you are bringing in the cash, and that is definitely true. But at the end of the day, I think great leaders, especially at colleges and universities, understand that they are in the people business. And that's not just the students, it's the faculty and the staff. But if you don't have the right faculty and staff working with the students, then the student success is just not going to come the way you want it to come. It's going to be a bunch of people just passing through your institution, and there's going to be very little buy-in from those students. You're just going to be the place they graduated from, not the place they say, I love it, I will give money to my alma mater anytime, right? And so I think that in order to attract top talent have got to see that commitment from leadership, and they've got to see a certain type of culture that's coming from the faculty and the staff. And I think the other thing is, I think that top talent, they want to see some sort of trend in developing talent. Because let's be honest here, we got almost 4,000 colleges and universities in this country. I can count on two hands the number of times I've heard people who are not in leadership positions say, oh, I love where I work and we make some great money. I can count on two hands, maybe two, the number of times I've heard that from people who are not in leadership positions. So we all know that that colleges and universities generally just don't pay that well. However, if you can offer someone something else in terms of compensation, right? Like you have a great benefits package, that's great. And people do need that and people want that. But what else can you give them? Because people want more. And that comes in, that definitely comes, the value of it really comes in the form of talent development. So if I go to XYZ University, I know I'm not going to make a lot of money. But if they have a really good talent development program that's going to help me become an assistant director, and then it's going to get me on the track to being a director. And maybe if I can jump to the faculty side and become a chair or a dean, or I can work my way into a faculty position where I'm on the tenure track. If I can have that kind of movement, and if I know that that is happening at a particular institution, I'm willing to say I'm going to make a little money so that I can secure a great professional future. So I think top talent, when they see that sort of thing, yeah, they're going to love. If you're a really big university, of course they're going to love football Saturday. Of course they're going to love it when March rolls around and your team gets into the tournament, because we know your team is going to get in, right? They're going to love that stuff. And of course they're going to say, yes, I'm building the leaders of tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, they're going to love all that stuff. But what else is there for them? And I think it comes in the form of developing talent, seeing coworkers who are motivated, and seeing leaders who are very invested in what's happening with faculty and staff.
Yeah. So you mentioned offering really good development programs. So what makes a really good development program? Let's say there's somebody listening who says, okay, maybe I have to invest a little bit more in my staff. Is it sending them to conferences, or is there something else that you would suggest, like trade programs, like extra programs where you walk away with a certificate?
Number one, I would say that the most valuable thing is mentorship. That is the most valuable thing. And I think especially with a new generation coming into the workforce, with Gen Z coming into the workforce, mentorship is going to be extraordinarily important for them. And so that's one thing. But I do think going to conferences, that's great because they have the opportunity to compare notes with colleagues around the country. They have the opportunity to network with colleagues. So conferences are also very valuable. But then I do think also, being able to go into some sort of formal program that does offer micro credentials, that is definitely on the table too. And it should be on the table too, because especially for the employees who may not necessarily want to pursue, you may have a bunch of employees who have bachelor's degrees and they don't necessarily want to pursue master's degrees. And of course, we know this is most often on the staff side of the house. And so you might have that. But if you can offer them micro credentials, then I do think that is a great offering. Or you have the ones who have the opportunity, if your campus does have master's programs that your employees are interested in, let them take those classes free. Offer it to them, please. I mean, I was talking to one person who was working at an institution, and they say, yeah, I really, really want to get a master's degree from this place. I'm glad I'm working there. And like a couple of months later, I talked to them and I said, hey, how's everything going? They said, man, I can't do it. And I was like, you can't do what? I can't do this master's degree thing. Man, I'm so hot. And I said, what happened? He said, we only get 10% off the degree. And I was like, wait a minute, what? And I knew he wasn't making that much money. And I was just sitting there going, man, the least they could do, if they're not going to pay you well, the very least they could do is give you a smooth path to getting an advanced degree. At the very least they could do. And that's not going to be, and I'm sitting there going, that can't be a huge expense, right? Because and then it was a master's degree that was actually very successful for this institution. So I'm sitting there going, they're getting their money, right? They are getting the people coming through doing it. The very least they could do for an employee who they know they're not paying well, give them the doggone path to get that master's degree. Now, doctorates, I get it, right? But a master's degree, come on, man. And so I really think that when you look at developing talent, you got to give them every opportunity. And I'll say this, Chris, if you can do that, even when someone leaves your institution, even if it's an involuntary separation, if they can leave saying, you know what, that didn't work out. However, here's what I learned while I was there. Here's what they did for me while I was there. At the very least, you're sending someone away who's not going to dog you out on Glassdoor, Indeed, Facebook. They're not going to write a Facebook dissertation about how crappy your campus is. And that's one, and let me tell you something. That is one thing that a lot of administrations really, really seem to be unaware of. They seem to be so unaware of what word of mouth looks like in the digital space. And I'm telling you right now, the one space that I think a lot of people do not think about when they think about how someone can sully the reputation of your campus is Facebook, because that's where everybody is writing extensively about their experiences working at campuses, and they are dropping names, right? They're sitting on Facebook saying, don't you ever try to work at such and such because Dr. So-and-so is this kind of person. And I'm telling you right now, they are damaging this institution. Now you got alumni seeing this stuff, right? And now you have the kids of the people on Facebook who are going, you make it sound like an awful place. And they're like, yeah, well, it is an awful place. Whatever you do not apply to that school. So, Chris, I think that a lot of people are missing those types of pieces when it comes to having a great reputation as an employer.
Yeah, man. Now you dropped the bomb there, man. With making that statement. So how can higher ed institutions soften the blow when they see that sort of negative social proof online? Do you respond to it? How do you go about that?
No, you don't respond to it. As a matter of fact, I had a situation when I was at my last stop where there was a disgruntled former employee. This person had been let go from the institution, and he had been let go for a good reason. right? It was something he did. But what happened was he had just enough evidence to make noise about something. And so what wound up happening, I think the institution wound up settling in court with this person. But the problem is that he made it hell on them. And he wrote all this stuff. He said all this stuff to the media. He posted it on Facebook. He did any and everything he could to make his case. Now, let's be clear. This person was wrong, right? They were let go because they were in the wrong. And we found out that this person was engaged in some criminal activity too. But the problem is that he made so much noise and he was able to actually make points that were believable to people. And there were folks who said, well, yeah, he might have done all this stuff, but he's right about Dr. So-and-so. That person is this kind of person. And I know this person is that kind of, and I know, and this other person he talked about, he wasn't wrong about them either. So his philosophy was basically, if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me. And the issue that, and so with that, it was such a mess, Chris, that was something that I chose not to respond to because it was just way too messy. And what did mess us up is when somebody decided to respond behind my back, and I was not pleased about that. But when you see it, though, I think the honorable thing for the administration to do is to find a way to address it with employees, right? Because you have to be honest. You have to be honest that there's this stain, this possible stain on your reputation. But then also, I think it's very important for administrations when they see disgruntled former employees who decide to tell the world about what they didn't like about the experience. I think is also appropriate for and smart for an administration to allow the faculty and staff to provide feedback about that and get a feedback loop going, because the worst thing you could do to faculty and staff is to not listen to them. That is the worst thing you could do, especially if you do something like collect employee satisfaction data and there's actually information in that data that tells you what they don't like, and you go to them and say, okay, what don't you like? And they're sitting there going, well, we took a survey. You know what we don't like. But I do think there has to be some honest conversation. I think there has to be a feedback loop created when you do have people who make at least an enormous amount of noise. But I think for the Marcom folks, no, you don't necessarily want to respond to that because a lot of times when those disgruntled employee situations come up, a lot of times it really might signal something's going on at the institution. It might be an EEOC complaint that is, if not legitimate, it is pretty close to legitimate. It might be someone who is playing the role of whistleblower, and they actually might be onto something, even if what they are trying to blow the whistle about can't be proven. Or it might be someone who's deciding that they are outright going to hire a labor lawyer. A lot of times when you have people who make that much noise on social media.
Yeah, I worked in legal for 8 years before I made a switch to marketing. So everything you say online can become evidence.
Oh, yeah.
So, might as well stay away from that because you don't want to leave a paper trail.
Right.
Especially not in a combative way. Now, this is where the importance of internal communications comes into play. Like you mentioned earlier, you have to make sure that your employees get the message from first party, from you, because they're going to hear about it somewhere. So bet coming from you, because if they hear it through the grapevine, there's like the telephone. Is that what it's called in the United States, where one person tells another. Yep. It's diluted. So best to follow internal communication practices, addressing the issue at hand, telling people that is what's going on, and then also letting them know, do not talk to the media unless you're one of the spokespersons.
Yeah.
About this particular topic. But let's switch gears a little bit. Let's stay back on the positive track. Can you discuss some successful initiatives where marketing directly contributed to a positive shift in Compass culture? What are some of the key elements there?
I think when it comes to marketing, to contributing to a positive campus culture, I think first thing is the internal work that has to be done, and that's internal alignment. I think internal alignment with human resources. And I also believe that there needs to be some internal alignment with whoever collects the data on the campus. So institutional effectiveness, I call those the big three of employer branding. I think is marketing, communications, HR, and institutional effectiveness. Those three have got to talk, and they got to get on the same page. I think also, though, from a Marcom standpoint, making sure there's some alignment with the institutional value proposition. That's a big thing. And then also engaging in some employee storytelling, faculty and staff storytelling. One of the things that I loved to do when I was in my last position is I really love getting faculty stories. Faculty can be so wonderfully, eclectic, and they can be so entertaining. A lot of times they don't realize how entertaining they are. And that's kind of the beauty of it, right? And then they'll tell you some offhanded thing like, yeah, I wrote a poem in London and it wound up getting an award. And it's like, wait, you're a physics professor. What are you talking about? And so it's like, no, we need to write a story about this poem and the award that it got. And so the physics professor is sitting there going, well, it's not physics related. And I'm like, no. Your students need to see this other side of you. That's what we need to talk about. And that's what makes your place here special, right? And then also paying attention to a specific microsite dedicated to careers, I think is another place where Marcom can be very, very helpful. Because it's one thing to have an HR website. You see colleges and universities, they'll have the HR website and all it has is a bunch of links to PDFs about the budget, about the benefits and stuff. And you're sitting there like, cool, yeah, great. But when you have a microsite that is dedicated specifically to talent attraction, that forces you to tell a lot of these stories. And then it also forces you to work more closely with HR to figure out what that perk is that no one knew anything about, right? There was one of my favorite stories is, about someone who was kind of going through the HR stuff, and they were going through the HR stuff and, whatever. And they talked to a fellow employee who said, oh yeah, I went and had dinner at such and such. And man, thank goodness for a university discount. And, a person was like, wait, what do you mean discount? And they were like, oh yeah, we get discounts at all these restaurants around the city. And they were just like, wait, what? And so this person had been there for a little while, but they didn't realize that they had this great perk. And it was so funny because the attitude was, I feel re-engaged with this institution. Even in this short amount of time, I feel so much better about being here because, man, that's a really cool thing for me to be able to go to someone, show my employee ID, I get a discount. So that's also great engagement for the institution as the anchor of its community, And so I think from a Marcom standpoint, being able to tell those stories, being able to publish a great careers microsite, I think aligning with the institutional value proposition, those types of strategies, I think can really work. And that's how Marcom can help with employer branding.
Yeah, that's right. Why hide the benefits when those benefits may be a draw for some people that come to your institution? Yeah. Like the free tuition, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. We all know how expensive a master's degree can be.
Yeah.
So
yes,
looking for a little bit less, putting in your time, getting that credential, nobody's ever going to take that away from you.
Right. Yeah. And you know what's funny, Chris? So a lot of times when I have spoken to people in HR, it's not that they're trying to hide it. They just think everybody knows about it. They assume that everybody knows. And sometimes the answer is, well, we talked about this in their orientation. Why don't they remember? And you're there like, well, for this person, orientation was like 18 months ago, and that might as well be 5 years in some cases because the work is so hard. And once you get in, all you do is put your head down and go to work. And so you have to remind people that not everybody is going to remember everything they hear and see in orientation, So it needs to live somewhere so that they can refer to it, and they can, and that's where the HR microsite can become much more robust, and it can be much more like a playland of perks and benefits and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So when you were at Dillard University, we talked last year. We talked about university branding at that episode before my show became the education marketing leader. We talked about the Write Your Legacy initiative.
Mm-hmm.
But you just mentioned that you also like to, so that Write Your Legacy initiative was more based on students writing their own legacy. But when it comes to faculty and staff testimonials, people, when they're looking for a job, they usually go to Glassdoor to look at the,
Yes.
what do people say? So social proof is super effective. It could negatively impact your institution, could positively impact your institution. Now, sending and creating faculty and staff testimonials, which angle would you take when you tell these stories? Is there a particular one that you created that stands out to you that was very successful in your eyes?
Yeah, I didn't have one that was necessarily, it hadn't taken off yet. I'll put it to you that way. I had just started to work on it, but, one example that comes to mind immediately, so thinking about Write Your Legacy, one example that comes to mind immediately was a professor at Dillard, a great professor by the name of Mona Lisa Saloy. And I love Dr. Saloy because she is someone who embodies the culture of New Orleans. She loves to talk about New Orleans culture. She's an English professor, and she was the state's poet laureate. And so to me, that campaign was custom fit for someone like her, because she's a writer, but she also really dips heavily into legacy, and she's a storyteller. And so with that, you can bring faculty and staff along with that sort of thing very easily, because what you do is you take a look at how they align, how their stories align with a particular campaign. And so, it was her. And then, there was a physics professor there, or there is a physics professor there, Dr. Darwish, Abdallah Darwish. And he's another one, lots of history being created with the stuff that he's doing as far as, producing the biggest number of Black students who are physics alumni of a single institution, so there's a legacy story there. But then there's also this whole thing about him writing a legacy, because with him, he was constantly working on how he could create the next generation. And he was constantly telling his story about that. And he was constantly telling stories about the students who he had produced, who he was so proud of, the ones who were on their way to getting doctorates and the ones who are working in laboratories. And so, you can easily move faculty and staff into these types of campaigns because they have stories too. And I think that's the biggest thing about employer branding. It's if I was standing in front of an HR team and a Marcom team right now, my question to them would be, what stories do you not know about? That's what we're chasing. What stories do you not know about that's going to make someone say, wait a minute, that is the place for me, that I'm applying to that place right now. I actually teach a course with Southern New Hampshire University, and one of the great things that SNHU has on their careers website, their careers microsite, is even if you don't see a position open for you, send us your resume anyway, because you never know where you'll fit. And that is such a great affirming message, and you're sitting there going, oh, sure, fine. But then at the same time, reading that line, you're thinking, wait, well, cool. I would love for them to have my resume. Even if I don't think it's going to amount to anything, I would love for these folks to have my resume, because I appreciate the fact that they are inviting people to submit their resumes, even though you might not see that position for you right now. So, so there are just so many ways, I think, to work faculty and staff into, existing campaigns. And I think there's just so many ways to be a lot more inviting and to be affirming to folks.
Yeah. So because sometimes when you go to a job board and there may not be a job there for you, or that you think is a good fit for you, you think it may not be a good fit for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't apply for it. But if you send in your resume, they have it. They see something in you that you may not necessarily see for a job they may not have posted yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
An opportunity to get in front of them before the whole job market jumps on that opportunity.
Yeah. Chris, let me say this. When I was a recruiter, I kept a stack of resumes, paper resumes that was pretty thick. And I can't tell you how many times I would be working with a client and there would be a job opening and it might be kind of tough to fill. And I'm sitting there going, I know one of these resumes has something. I know it. And so I would go back to those resumes immediately, or I would go into my computer and look at the files in my computer, or there would be a job that would pop up and I'm working with a hiring manager. And as I'm talking to the hiring manager, I would say, you know what? I know someone who's good, who can fit this. I said, I'll get right back to you. In the next 15 minutes, that hiring manager has a resume that I got maybe 5 months ago, or I would call the person, whoever's resume I have, I would call them or I'll email them and say, hey, I have this job. Are you looking right now? So that's a great point, that even for the institution to have your resume, you never know who's going to look at it and say, wait a minute, I think this Chris guy is somebody that we need to reach out to because we're about to post this position. I saw his resume. I think this can work out.
Yeah. And the majority of people are in the market, even if they're not actively looking, they're always looking to improve, right? And move up. And if you have an opportunity, they'll at least entertain it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Let's talk about diversity and inclusion a little bit, which is a critical component to attracting a healthy, thriving workplace culture. So how can marketers highlight those elements in their branding efforts?
Well, I think the first thing is that people have to frame DEI in a really in a very thoughtful way. I think that institutions need to look at two things. Number one, and let's just stick with diversity for now. I think number one, when an institution wants to say, hey, we need to show our diversity, number one, they need to ask themselves, is there something else they want to do with diversity? And number two, what do we already have that shows diversity here? And so I say that because I think it is possible for an institution to communicate dimensions of diversity that are already there. So let's take an HBCU, for example. People assume that the only people working at HBCUs are Black people. Well, of course, we know that's not true, right? There are people of all shades working at HBCUs. However, that may not necessarily be the thing for an institution to highlight as diversity, the different cultures working there, or the different ethnicities, or the different nationalities. What may happen is that particular institution may say, well, we really see a lot of diversity as far as where our faculty and staff come from. So let's highlight the fact that our faculty and staff come from 10 different countries, 30 different countries. That is the thing that we want to talk about. We're not going to talk about skin color, right? We're going to talk about where they come from. And the story that we're going to tell in our campaigns is how all of these minds, these global minds, are shaping the minds of our students. Now, if you have an institution that says, well, I think we need more African-American faculty and staff, whereas I love that, I mean, I applaud that, but is that a real goal for you? And if so, why is that the goal? Because, Chris, one thing I'm going to say about Black folks is that we know when people are pandering to us, okay? And so if they're sitting there going, hey, we're reaching out to you because we need more Black employees, it's like, okay, so did you look at my resume? Or did you just see my picture and say, hey, we'll reach out to that Black guy? I mean, that's not going to work, because if anything else, that upsets a lot of Black folks. And so
I think this is the same truth with Asians, whites, if you
absolutely,
hey, I need this particular piece of the puzzle to fit into my greater picture, it's like, okay, this is really what we're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to folks at HBCUs that say, "Hey, we need more white people," and I'm sitting there going, is that really what you want to do? I mean, so it's like, don't pander to anybody. But I think the thing is that when it comes to marketing, number one, you look at the different dimensions of diversity that you already have. But then if you have a goal, be realistic about that goal and don't pander. I think what you do is you invite people to come be a part of your culture. And I think this is extremely important. On one of the episodes of I Want to Work There, I talked to this great organizational culture and professional and recruiter by the name of Brittany King. She's probably going to get sick of me saying her name, but Brittany, came up with this fantastic concept of don't look for people who are going to fit your culture, look for people who are going to cultivate your culture. And so maybe what you're looking for as in terms of diversity, maybe you stand a better chance if you are that institution that's saying, hey, we would love to have more people of color here. Maybe what it is you reach out to folks and say, hey, we want you to come help us grow our culture, and reach out to people on that basis. And if you happen to reach out to 20 Black folks, great, but you need to be able to explain to them why is it that their Blackness is somehow going to help you cultivate your culture. That's the conversation that personally I would want to have, right? And it can't be based on color. It has to be based on pure diversity. It has to be based on purely saying, we need people to help us expand our mindset on this campus. And I think that's the kind of thing that's going to get people of all diverse abilities, diverse cultures, diverse nationalities. When you talk about people, who are neurodivergent and that sort of thing, that's the sort of thing that I think really, really attracts people to be able to have that kind of conversation. So I think in the diversity toolkit, I think that's the way, in my opinion, that's the way to market to folks so that you do have a rich culture of diversity and equity and inclusion and belonging to follow.
Yeah. Diversity is a beautiful thing because it expands our mindset. I was just on a webinar yesterday that I listened to with a marketer from New Delhi, India. And the way this guy presented, this guy came in from an angle that was so deep and thought out and methodical. Mm-hmm. I was like, no American would ever speak that way on a webinar. So like it opened my mind the way he spoke about, brought the spiritual aspect into it, I was like, oh, this is refreshing because I don't hear it in a corporate setting like that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's the thing. I mean, it's the mindset that really, really helps. And again, in the example of attracting more Black employees, if you want to grow your people of color or grow the numbers of people of color, again, I think a lot of times it really does depend on framing. And I think framing it as, listen, we're going to honor you and we're going to honor your culture and we want you and your culture here. But it's really more about the intellectual capital that you're going to bring to this campus. And I think that's the way to really market diversity with employees and folks at campuses.
Absolutely. Last question of the day. For institutions looking to revamp their employer branding, what is the first step they should take so that people will say, I want to work there?
I mean, the first step is internal. Get HR, Marcom, and institutional effectiveness at the same table, because that's where all the robust conversations are going to happen. That's where people are going to really get an idea of what the current employees are talking about. And I think it's important to note that to build a great employer brand, you have to know what your current employees are talking about. You can't, if you go out and say, we need to go and get some new employees, and you ignore what's happening with your current employees, what's going to happen is you're going to bring in this new crop of employees to campus, and your current employees are going to they're going to sabotage everything. And it's not because they're being nasty. It's because their viewpoint was neglected. And so when people are neglected, they shout for attention, right? And so I think when you get HR, Marcom and institutional effectiveness in the same room at the table and you get them talking, now you have a real opportunity to figure out all of the moving parts on campus so that you can go out and attract the types of people that you want. And the other two parts of this is not just talent attraction, but then also those three areas talking can also figure out talent experience. And if you can figure out talent experience, then you can experience talent retention. And, you know, a lot of folks don't realize this, but you spend a lot of money on high turnover. It's a lot of funds that you don't see going out of the window. And so I do think that that first step to make sure that there's a good, robust conversation, or at least to have the beginning of a good, robust conversation, is to get Marcom, HR, and institutional effectiveness in the same room at the same table.
Yeah, it's the same with client acquisition, right? It's more expensive to get a new one than to retain the current one.
Yes.
If you give them a little bit of a raise. But then again, as we talked about, money doesn't solve the problem. Makes them happy for a week or two, and then if everything else is toxic, you know, that's not going to help.
No, it's not. You know, there was a great example of a colleague of mine who, you know, we were at Dillard together, and this person was at Dillard, had gone to an institution that was much more well-resourced. They were getting paid more. There was no doubt about it. And they didn't like it. And they wound up going back to Dillard. And when folks were asking, hey, why did you come back? Her response was, I just feel a better sense of community here. I feel as if the work that I'm doing here matters more. And it matters more to you. It matters more to me. It matters more to the students. And so that was something. And you mentioned the toxic work culture. I mean, Chris, I don't think I can state strongly enough how damaging a toxic work culture is to an employer brand. You can't just explain stuff away. You can't say, oh, well, the reason we're having a problem is because this person is disgruntled and they're disgruntled all the time. So, forget about them. Well, why are they disgruntled all the time? It can't just be them having a bad day every single day because of, you know, they just didn't eat the right cereal. I mean, something put them in that space. And one of the issues that I think will contribute a lot to, well, it's already contributing a lot to employer branding right now, making sure that an institution is positioned as a great place to work, is psychological safety. That is a huge issue. And Gen Z is really coming with that issue. Gen Z is going to test you, and they're going to ask you, if I'm going to work here, is there going to be psychological safety for me? Because I identify as, and I don't want anybody throwing it in my face. I don't want anybody ignoring me. I want people to pay attention to who I am as a person, and psychological safety is an enormous part of that. So I appreciate you bringing up having a toxic environment, because that is a serious issue that needs to be discussed on many, 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 many campuses.
Eddie, wonderful conversation today. Always appreciate talking to you. How can people get in touch with you?
The easiest way is to go to my website, eddiefrancis.com, EDDIEFRANCIS.com. Also, I am very active on LinkedIn. All you got to do is look me up. I'm sitting right there with my smiling face and my bald head, and we can connect. Happy to do it.
And make sure you tune into Eddie's podcast as well. I want to work there.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate you, Chris.
You too. All right, you take care now, my friend.
All right, you too, man.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning into the show today. If you enjoyed it, don't keep it to yourself. Share with your friends in your network. And if you have a moment, I would really appreciate a review of the podcast. That'll help other people find the show as well. Tune in every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. when I release another episode. Take care now. Have a good one, friends.